as a problem at all. The issue in ODM for me is the fact that it has a leader that desires to lead the country and has had prospects for being the president for a long time. And so, in that regard, therefore, there will not be so much room for growth beyond some level. And of course, then there's going to be frustration, sometimes confusion on how to deal with that leadership. It's a strong leadership, one that brings people together. In fact, sometimes I always wonder whether you are able to separate ODM from Raila Amolo Odinga, because assuming that he left the party tomorrow, would you have the ODM that as we know it? And so anybody who says that Raila is a problem in ODM doesn't understand how parties are built and run in this country. And so I just believe, for example, like what I told you earlier. When I joined Parliament in 2013, I had ideas and views of how I thought a party should be run, on how, on a number of issues. One of them, for example, was the elections date. The elections date, I still believe to date that our elections, if done in December, is a better date instead of August. And when I proposed that bill, that time, gentleman across was the ombudsman. Someone I respect so much. I actually sought him out. He bought me tea. I told him what I was trying to do. I met my party at that time. I met Kalonzo Musyoka. And I gave him the reasons why I thought this was important. Some of the reasons were quite selfish for a person. Because let me just tell you something, Debal. And I want to reference this with the last elections. You see, people from Western Kenya, Nyanza, Western, go home a lot during Christmas period. Last year, I was trying to check those I saw in the village in August during elections, and the stampede I saw in December when people were coming for Christmas. And then I was trying to reference that with the turnout in August. Elections in December would definitely lead to higher turnout in Western Kenya and Nyanza. And part of the reason that I proposed that bill was that we want to give guys ample time to go and vote. Of course, you've seen how education calendar was tampered with last year because of elections and all that. So we had very good reasons for that. And before I took the bill to Parliament, I had a discussion with my party leadership. But when the voting came, I was thrown under the bus. I was told, that bill is Ochieng's bill. Ochieng has been paid money by Jubilee. We don't believe in that bill. Okay? So the reasons, like I told earlier, the reasons why people would leave a party normally are sometimes either personal or policy-oriented. There's a time when they were doing, remember the tear gas Mondays? I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember.
Yes, and the issues were almost the same as they are today, about IBC and the reforms that required at that time. So we had been out there for a long time in the streets, and so the Honorable Kabando and I decided to start a caucus. We went and briefed Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka, we went and briefed Raila Amolo Odinga about our caucus and why we think this caucus is important. And so the first meeting we had was funded by NDI. We put together 98 MPs at Lilian Tower Safari Club.
That's the National Democratic Institute.
Yes. The following day, I had a meeting with my party leader at that time. I explained to him what this was about. We were just opening Parliament session September 2015. And so we had a party PG at Mazima Springs, the WIPA headquarters. And in that meeting, the agenda was changed from the party PG to why Kabana and I were leading a bipartisan caucus. Who had told me to do it, who had paid me money to do it. And, the kind of insults, abuse, personal, almost physical, that I went through, told me that then why must I be in this if I cannot be heard? And at that meeting, I remember myself telling the party leadership, because at that time it was a co-leadership, so there was Honorable Tangula there, Kalonzo there, and Honorable Raila. I told them that, you cannot lead a coalition and hope to lead this country if you cannot listen to divergent views.
Right.
And if divergent views have to be always labeled as having been bought. And so there is a sense in which if you don't listen to party members and you don't allow robust discussion on arguments or on positions that you don't agree with, then people will have to look for options. And I believe that even the 9 members of Parliament who are now trying to get away from ODM are basically trying to look for options and trying to get room to express their views and ideas on areas that I think they...
But looking at some of them, they're barely actually 3 months in the party since we did, the elections as well. 3 months, 4 months. They're still wet behind the ears, divergent views.
Incidentally, all of them are second-term MPs.
I'm not saying all of them, some of them.
Not all.
Yeah. Okay, let's say from you.
You know,
yeah.
you reflect.
No, maybe the senator for Kisumu.
Not all, yes.
Right.
First, let me start from where Honorable Chieng left in terms of my views during BBI, and he's quite right. I held some views which I expressed robustly, and we ended up in a situation of what you could call friction. The difference is, from the current situation, we did not have any issue which we would call a political difference. This was a difference of opinion on a legal matter. And I believed that when it comes to a strictly legal matter, then even those of us within the party should at least defer to some of us who are lawyers and who even have a history of having participated in writing the Constitution. But there are others who believed that that should not be so. And so it ended up, we had some exchanges. So that's the first difference. But let me tell you, just like I'm saying now, even at that time with those differences, and some of the guys within the party prodded me that if I had a difference, it doesn't matter whether it's legal or otherwise, then I should resign. And I dared them to write to me because I was going to resign. I was prepared to resign. You told me, actually. Yes, I told you. Yeah, you told me. If they had written to me, I was going to resign. And that's why from being a member of parliament.
A member of parliament, yeah.
Yes, I was prepared to resign, but they didn't write to me, okay? Now, so that's how it went. And that's why I believe that when it reaches a certain time that you believe you have some fundamental and irreconcilable differences with your party formation, then you should take the courage to just resign and chart your path. That brings me to the second thing of Azimio. And this is a point I was making. You see, I am now a second-term member of parliament. And I respect Honorable Chieng because he's been re-elected. And it's true, there are times that we went, and de-campaigned him. Because that's what you must do when you're in a different party, Yeah. But as much as I'm a second-term member of parliament, and I was elected by a very significant, almost all the votes in Rarieda, I was elected in ODM, which was also in Azimio. At the end of the day, of the votes I got, I can't segregate which ones I got as me, which I'd have gotten as Otiende Amolo, irrespective of the party.
Yes.
I cannot segregate how many I got on account of ODM. I cannot segregate how many I got on account of Azimio. And what it means then is that whatever situation and formation I was in at the time of election, I ought to respect it up to the next election if I decide to change. Because if I change, I might be betraying some people who may have voted for me on account of Azimio. Now, the point I was making in respect of Honorable Chieng is that, yes, he left ODM and he went to MDG, which I respect very much. But then in MDG, the two major coalitions, he could have chosen to go with Kenya Kwanza at the time, before elections, but he chose to go with Azimio. So there's no telling how many votes he got on account of Azimio. But immediately after elections, in fact, he was the first to leave. Now,
of course I left publicly.
Yes, yeah, but you still left anyway. So my point was, it is a betrayal to the extent that you only left after the election.
After the election.
And there's no telling how many people, therefore, of Ugenya you betrayed on that account. In fact, if you were in a functioning democracy, and I think last week we had the discussion on that, you'd have been deemed to have crossed the floor. By now, you should have been released so that we should have had fresh elections in Uganda.
No, but let me just finish this.
We'll come back to that. Yes, okay. You would have been deemed, but because we are in a democracy where some of those things don't respect the letter of the Constitution, many people are still allowed to, in fact, cross the floor without doing a formal letter of resignation, and they continue. And that's what's increasing this kind of misconduct. And that brings me to the third and last issue in terms of party discipline. You cannot have your cake and eat it. If you believe you are so fiercely independent, you do not want to associate with anyone, then don't join a party. Don't even join that formation. But if you do, it's like a church. You will only remain part of it if you agree with the doctrines of that church. You will not come, say, to the, to the Anglican church, and you want to bring the doctrines of Legion Maria, that you want to be polygamous in the Anglican church when they have insisted you must be monogamous. Then you just don't mix it. And that is the same situation with the parties. So much so that for the first time, we have written party discipline into the constitution, so that people must adhere to the party. And we even created the office of the registrar of political parties to ensure that party discipline. You just don't do anything that you want. That then means you can't just be in one party, then you just leave and go and meet the leader of another party without discussing with the party leadership rank and file, And that's not the same thing as saying, if as together, right now Honorable Chieng decided for his party that they would go to Kenya Kwanza, would he be saying the same thing if he had remained in Azimio and one of his, maybe the deputy secretary general of his party went and said, I am now working with Kenya Kwanza? He would be the first to say, no, party discipline requires that you must consult with me and the rank and file of the party leadership. That is not to say there's no democracy. That is just to say you must adhere to that. If then, as leadership, like we did when Raila met Uhuru, then the decision is made collectively to work together. Not even to, we didn't join government, but to cooperate. Then that is done as a party. That was not an individual decision. And that's a very fundamental difference. You can't go as an individual and purport to do what you have not discussed and agreed as a party. Party discipline requires, like Wiper met the other day over the weekend in Naivasha, you discuss, and the position you resolve, that is the position to carry forward. If you decide to go the other way, that is party indiscipline, and it must come with some consequences.
So, before you answer that, what of the open defiance that we still had also 9 members going full steam ahead to meet the Deputy President on Wednesday? Even after you had all these happenings, and we had a Stony Earth meeting, some of them could not even access the place, but still, they went full steam ahead.
That is, it's adding insult to injury. It is exacerbating the indiscipline. You have done an act of indiscipline, and as it's being examined, then you continue in that act. You then shouldn't complain if there are consequences that then come to bear later. Yes.
Honorable Chieng, you wanted to respond?
Yes,
briefly,
two things.
before we gravitate the discussion too.
The reason MDG left Azimio, by the way, is that we had candidates. We had 120 candidates across the country, and our candidates were treated the same everywhere. We had a governor candidate in Kisumu, the deputy. We had MP candidates in Busia, Kakamega, and wherever they went in Nyanza, they were told that this is an ODM zone. Azimio ends in Awasi. That's what they will be told. So after elections, we actually met as a NEC and took a collective decision. Now, the reason, for example, what Rombo Chende is saying would not apply to MDG is because part of the Azimio coalition agreement and any other coalition agreement is that there's always exit clauses. Yeah, and so we just invoked that exit clause. And it will shock you, Debal, that up to, and this I shouldn't be saying, because it was something that was very bad, after the time of elections, nobody had seen the Azimio agreement. Nobody. Apart from, people were being given the last pages to sign, and of course, we are at a time when the times were running very fast and all that. And so I want to just rest this position, Honorable Chende, that I'll do the same thing twice over. If partners in a coalition behave the way ODM behaved against us, we'll do it several times over. Because it is wrong to lie or to pretend that you're in a coalition, and then you go full throttle against your coalition partners and hope they'll not complain because you think you're a big brother. It's just wrong, plain wrong. And part of why, for example, things have gone the way they have gone for Azimio, it's just that way, the fact that the hubris, we are big brother, we can do you anything and you can do that. You can do as nothing, right? And it's going to cost that coalition. I can tell you. You've seen how it's wobbled so far. It's going to wobble further. Not just the coalition, but even individual parties are going to wobble further for the reason that people still think that they can dictate to elected leaders how they talk, how they breathe, who they take tea with. It never works like that. There's a way in which every party must learn to talk to its members. There's a way in which every party must learn to talk to its leaders. These are elected people. They're not just party members. They're elected, they're MPs, they're senators, they're governors. Talk to them, make them understand what you want to do for the future. But don't talk at them. Don't every time read the right act to them. You know, even if it's a kid that you keep caning the kid, then he says, I'll do whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to be cane, and it ends there. And so there's a way in which we must encourage eternal, discussions in our parties to make them better, to make them stronger.
Right, let me loop in Isaac Moura. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, we're still discussing party politics here with the recent implosion within the ODM, Jubilee as well happening. And now we have Azimio Rebel members as well, who are very categorical that they want to break away from the grip of Raila Odinga. You've been in ODM before. You also. So all of you are actually party mates. Otieno Molo, yeah, you remember hacking to the days of a Man in Black as well. I think you have a bit rich history. Yeah, you can actually tell us as well. But we were just discussing this with these 9 renegades, so to speak, and their fate. And now they're very categorical that they are leading a rebel against Raila. Are they going to succeed? Or this also will be putting their political lives on the chopping block? Way too early for some of them.
I think, let me first apologize for getting in late. I got lost. It's good I say that.
You got lost?
I got lost because I was using the expressway. Somebody had told me that I should get off at Airtel. And there's nothing called Airtel on the road. Anyway, so I got lost.
All the way to Mlolongo?
I went up to Eastern Bypass and then trying to get back here was a bit of a challenge. I would have been here by around 6:19.
So sorry about that.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
So it was not
by
because I was quite, we spoke about it.
Okay.
So now, I have gone through the whole hog of these so-called expulsions, and I can tell you, they don't go anywhere.
But not within ODM.
No, even
expulsion,
within. No, even, I was also expelled in ODM. Well, you don't know that. The BAL. I was expelled. I went and told Raila Odinga, thank you very much for having nominated me. I want to move to Jubilee. And we had a very candid conversation. The next time I was expelled, some people were pardoned, like in Cyprian Iringo, but it didn't go anywhere. So I was expelled. We were 6 of us. Myself, Maangi, Salim Mvuria, Zainab Chizuga, and the others I may not remember. But we were there and we were taken through that so-called kangaroo disciplinary process at Marsh Hotel along, I think, Kaligama, wherever it is. Now, for Jubilee, they went the full hog, actually, because they even degazetted me. They even had somebody gazetted. The only remaining thing was to swear in, but the rule of law prevailed. Now, what is different, the BAL, is that this time round, it is not the outsiders who are rebelling against ODM. And by the way, Davis Ocheng, let me remind you, because that thing has stuck in my mind. When Davis Ocheng presented some signatures for Okoa, Kenya, at Orange House, and we were there we had a NEC PG meeting. And he had really compiled a lot of those ones. And it was among the very few MPs then who had complied with the directive to do so. When he presented, it was not well received. And I asked myself, is there more than meet the eye? And my conclusion then was that any emerging leader has to be shown that they can only toe the line in a certain particular way. And even my brother, who I really respect, Otieno Amolo, he was in hot soup in the last parliament when him and Orengo at some point were almost being, because of saying BBI was not constitutional. So I think ODM has developed that character. The only difference right now, though, is that there are credible leaders within ODM from, the backyard of Raila Odinga that now are saying openly, we want to chart a new way forward. And Davis Ouma Ocheng is the one who started it. by winning a seat without being an ODM member, his own party, MDG. Now, Raila Odinga had hopes that he would be president. And that kept people waiting and moving closer to him, and But now, if he couldn't win the presidency, when he had the machinery of Uhuru Kenyatta and the deep state, things are different. He is now 78 years old. There is a new emerging leadership, and the people who are opposing have been very close to him. Look at Karoli Omondi. He was a private secretary to the Prime Minister. Tom Ojienda was part of the legal team at the Supreme Court. Gideon Chanda is from Bondo. I even had people from Mark Nyamita's constituency, supporting him. I saw the Suba elders saying their leader is right. Look at John Mbadi. He's grown cold. He's actually almost bolting out. So it's different. I think there's a serious succession issue, because the group around Raila Odinga that have really dominated the politics of Luo Nyanza are now on their exit strategy. Some of them have become governors, and so therefore they can only serve another extra term, or maybe they're in their second term. But then there's a young group of people that want to chart a new way forward, and they cannot be kept at bay. Why am I saying so? I was in Gangu village when we went for the Indorieda, when we went for the homecoming of Eliud Owalo. The whole ODM brigade was there. In fact, that morning they were at State House, Kisumu. And James Orengo spoke very well. I respect him a lot. In fact, I have a lot of respect for many of them. So what is different now with meeting the president at the State House? What has Jalango done wrong by meeting the president? Is that called party rebellion? Is party rebellion only when it suits a certain narrative? When also governors are being told, now, for development purposes, like Arati said, you can work with the government. But for politics, how can you dichotomize such kind of a thing? This party discipline is only an exercise in futility. It is just a way of trying to, segregate people who think otherwise. And I don't think it's going to happen. My case is a very good testimony. It's a very good, it's a landmark ruling. There is also that one of Osotsi, who ostensibly was even helped by ODM to, when ANC was fighting him. So there's a lot that really, if you follow the due process of the law, is almost impossible to remove a member of parliament. It's just, you will harass them with court processes, but that is also what emboldens people. And the situation is much different. They are using, it's like using the map of Nairobi to navigate Mombasa. Things have really changed. Now even the core Raila supporters, the one who truly believed in him, know that he has no chance of becoming president. It's very different. Before, people still had the hope. And for sure, I give credit to them. I was once there for 10 years. 5 times is quite a good, trial. But for now, moving forward, you cannot have opposed Moi, opposed Kibaki, and of course supported at some point, opposed Uhuru, now opposing Ruto. Four presidents. And then expect still you'll have another opportunity. Age is not on their side. And also, the young generation cannot quite connect. So there's a critical mass of people from the backyard of Raila Odinga that are saying these are different. Right now, those rallies and mandamanos, if it was in 2007, the Raila of 2007 that we all supported, the country would be burning. Now it's business as usual. In fact, sometimes we don't even know that there was a rally. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Otieno Omolo, you don't think maybe it's a high time that Raila needs to look in the mirror and just face the reality that succession has to happen within the party? Well, the time is not really on his side, and the wind of change is here, the writing is on the wall. It is high time maybe he should pass on baton for people who also are well able, like you, maybe, or who have the intellectual provenance to also carry on with the party leadership.
Well, first of all, let me welcome Honorable Isaac Maura. We've not met in a while, and he's my friend. And I'm sorry that he was confused and got lost. But that confusion is symptomatic of the Kenya Kwanza administration. They are confused on a lot of things. Isaac, if you had stuck this side, you would be less confused. Secondly, the interesting thing about this whole discussion is that everyone in Kenya Kwanza is very busy discussing ODM and ODM issues. What is it their business? Why can't they just discuss their own issues? Why can't they, as Honorable Chien says, now that they also have their own sort of agreement, which He was complaining the Azimio one was not made public. We've not seen yours made public either. Why can't they make it public and discuss how you cooperate? When your neighbor leaves their house and comes to your house to start running the affairs, when is a meal supposed to be made, when is it supposed to be served, the way they are trying to get into all the parties, they are trying to get into ODM, they are trying to get into Jubilee, they are trying to get into Wiper, they are trying to get into everything else, it cannot portend well. And anyone within ODM or any such party who thinks that Kenya Kwanza can come in with good intentions is mistaken. Kenya Kwanza can only come in to destroy, not to build. And that is why party discipline requires that anyone who wants to help them destroy us must be dealt with before they destroy us, because they can't come with any good intentions. The only point to be made here is this. You know, for an outsider like Isaac Mwaura, you can say anything. You can say, oh, those who are opposing Raila are popular. You know, Raila no longer has power. Let me tell you, Isaac, ask David Ochieng here. If there's any group who believe that, you know, Raila is no longer strong, let them just call a meeting in the middle of, even say, Kisumu. Then you can test their popularity. Don't tell us that you had somebody say, some Lone Ranger saying in the radio, you know, some fake elder talking. Those ones, we are in politics. We know how to do those. You know how to get somebody to speak to in your support, but that does not translate to strength. The question of saying anybody is now tired, they should give the mantle, it never rises. That's not how politics works. Politics does not work that way. The strength of any person or any entity is to pull in the right direction together. The question of who will ever be president, who will succeed, who can never arise until now you sit at a table like this and discuss it. Those ones arise naturally in those circumstances. What is important is that you pull in the same direction. And I can tell you, I've been attending those rallies. I think that Isaac and his team, maybe they've not been seeing. If I were them, I would be very worried, because the desperation that Kenyans have and the annoyance that they have at this situation where we have a circle of electoral injustice, which is now coupled by everything else that was promised. This Kenya Kwanza government is going the opposite direction. And everything else that can ameliorate their situation is being turned upside down. And to make matters worse, they are being talked at the way DP Gachagua is talking at. People are really, really mad out here. If I were them, I would be very, very worried.
Nibali, no. First of all, you know, Kenyans are frustrated. Kenyans are angry. And probably hungry too, because of the state of the economy. And this is not only happening in Kenya, but almost everywhere in Africa. If you go to South Africa today, you see what's happening on the streets there. Across the road in Uganda, everywhere, there's frustration about the economy and how, you know, democracy works. And so, personally, I have an issue with using these frustrations, this hunger, this, you know, economic situation for political reasons. I'm against trying to ascribe the state of the economy today to William Ruto and Kenya Kwanza, because that's not true. It's just not true that the current state of affairs that we are in was brought by William Ruto and Kenya Kwanza. It's just not true. And so trying to use it, I mean, Mark Twain defined patriotism as supporting your country all the time and supporting government when it deserves it. This, for me, Debali, is a time to support the country, not to try to foment a rebellion, not try to foment disaffection among the populace. This is a time to try to bring all our minds together, but you cannot do so if one part of the populace says, you're not president, we don't recognize you, we can't talk to you because you're not. You get it? And so I think we need to place the issues where they belong. And part of why I'm in Kenya Kwanza today is the fact that when we're on the other side, we just don't, everybody's a problem apart from ourselves. Everybody's a problem apart from ODM and Azimio, everybody. And so you can blame the Supreme Court, you can blame IBC, you can blame Chebukati, you can blame the weather for not being announced president, apart from your own failings. And that's where I depart with my former colleagues. That we don't do introspection and say, where did we go wrong? But it's been said that in the last election, and I want Honorable Botieno to go and check the maths, that the voter turnout between in 2017 and 2022 is negative 150,000 votes for Nyanza alone. Negative 150,000 votes. For the 5 years, we've not added anybody who took voters' cards for the 5 years. Okay? So, if 1 million people voted in Nyanza in 2017, only 850 voted in 2022. We are not talking about that at all. We're only looking at who stole the elections, where we're not looking ourselves. Yesterday I saw a complaint about one MC in all Azimio rallies in the whole country, even where he didn't need to be there. You've had Sabina Chege speak about how Azimio was run and all that. And so a way must be found, in my opinion, to deal with the level of justice, but we cannot have people having their own set of facts. We must be able to agree on some facts. We cannot have people having their own set of truths. We must be able to agree that truth is truth. I know we're living in post-truth times, but we must be able to have some truths. And we cannot be blaming everyone else for our problems, apart from ourselves, where we should be able to say, in this case, anyway, tulitupa mbao. So I wanted to just say that so that we understand the fact that the elections are behind us now. And you know, lying to people that, oh, there'll be something ahead here, that Ruto will be removed from presidency and therefore Raila will be president, is wrong. Because that's what is being pushed in the rallies. We need to agree the fact that there's a president in the country, and where possible, help him govern the country, bring the economy back together, then we can do all these things. But having a situation where we are, it's like blackmailing the whole country.
Right, but you know, Kenya Kwanza also has to bite the bullet, because everyone was hanging on every word that was being pronounced from those podiums. You know, when we have the stump speeches, you know, we'll come and we'll revive the economy, we'll have maize, and then right now also they're rowing back on some of the promises they made.
I agree.
Case in point is the subsidies, right? I think maybe they're realizing this was a wrong move. They shouldn't have come too quickly on the subsidies as well. Now we can see they're actually reversing back to subsidy. And this was meant to cushion Kenyans for what is really happening. So what is really informing that? Because it came bang. You know, this was the previous administration's doing. The subsidies is no longer sustainable. But we shouldn't have asked ourselves, why do we still have the subsidy in light of what you're talking about? You know, we have all these exogenous externalities that is affecting the world, affecting everybody, the war, the crude oil, and we have subsidies to cushion Kenyans. Talk of fertilizer, right? And now we import fertilizer. People are asking, why were we, no, not even a fertilizer, maize. Why were we importing maize, buying it at 6,000, while we had the locals who were actually, to actually sell it to government for 5,000 shillings? People they don't really understand. Is there a rhyme or reason for only 1,000 shillings? So these are some of the things that Kenyans actually are wondering, what is this Kenya Kwanza administration doing in terms of the economy itself? Is it helping itself? We have also, you're paring down on expenditure. We want to save 300 billion shillings. We still have also civil servants, some of the salaries being scaled up. We were talking about 10,000 house allowances is being increased to the civil servants. You're paring down also on the ECD teachers. You want to pay them 7,000 shillings. These are some of the things people don't really understand what is going on.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. And I wanted to speak about the subsidy, for example. If I was president today, I would do the same thing the president has done today. I would scrap up subsidies. Like I told you earlier.
Why are they bringing it back?
Let me explain first about the subsidies and why I think it didn't work. And Honorable Tiende runs a constituency, a member of parliament. And we had a maize subsidy. But there's nobody in this country, in rural Kenya, who ever said they ever saw the subsidized maize. In the budget committee now, we are running a budget, we are running a budget deficit of 4 billion payable to millers, but no one saw the maize. Nobody can tell you in Ugenya or in Rwanda, and because we've asked questions, no one can tell you that for sure we saw the maize. The fuel subsidy was steeped in so much corruption that at every level people were getting, if it's 5 shillings subsidy, someone was getting 50 cents, another 1 shilling, another. It was so steeped in corruption that you cannot tell why it was even there in the first place. And so, in my opinion...
But to be very categorical, we're talking about the fuel subsidy, not even the main subsidies. The fuel subsidy. Subsidy. You cannot
want to choose which one to talk about and which one to talk about. The subsidies were wrong, in my opinion. They were meant to help us win elections. They didn't help us win the elections. That's the truth. That all along we knew that they were wrong, but we had to keep them so that you see what happened in the elections. Now, if, for example, you want to do subsidy, in my opinion, you should not choose for people what they're going to eat. If you want to give new subsidies, Dibal, scope the country and say we have these 2 million people who can't afford. Give them 1,000 shillings each, 2,000 shillings each, let them buy the food they want. Why would you want to choose on maize only? Now, on the maize issue in North Rift, people just refuse to sell maize, people are hoarding maize. And we have facts, we brought these facts in Parliament. People just refuse to sell maize to government, and then when now government says we're going to import, they start crying out. This has been a problem for so many years, that people keep maize, hoping the prices will go up, and government tells them, sell maize to us, they refuse to sell maize. So we cannot be hoarding maize. When the government takes action to help the country get cheaper maize, then you start crying foul. But for me, the biggest issue that we have here today, and I wanted to check historically, countries that have had situation like the one we're in today, almost at a recession level, whether they come up in 6 months. This president has come into power, has put a floor, a ceiling on our going down. We were definitely going down. He's put a floor and say, yes, we've gone down enough. I'll bite the bullet and say, I'll remove the subsidies. I'll bite the bullet and say, we'll stop wanton borrowing. It takes a while for us to feel the changes that are being proposed today. It's not instant coffee. I believe that if we gave this government time, we'll feel the impact of these policies. But we're not being patient.
All right, let me hear from Isaac Maura.
You know, Debal, before I come to the issues of economics, as Davis has explained very well, you need to study the trajectory of William Ruto. When he when he started taking over the leadership of Rift Valley, he was able to edge out the older generation of leaders, and I don't want to use the word create, but he propped up the would-be future leaders, the Murkomens, the Cheroyos, that group. And you can see his journey trajectory starting around 2005. He succeeded because now even Gideon Moi could not secure his seat as senator. Now he came to Central, and it is the same thing. You would expect the likes of Peter Kenneth, Kabogo to be calling the shots. He propped up new leaders, and today even the Deputy President is a first-time member of Parliament, much as he's very experienced as an administrator. So I think if then we go by that, I have never seen before, not former members of Parliament, really, not other leaders, but real leaders who are elected, like the senator for Kisumu, you know, the MP for this and that, you know, constituency, be coming out boldly to say we are actually charting a new way forward. And by the way, you know, power abhors a vacuum, and nobody is bequeathed power. You take it. Power is given. It's taken. It's not given. It's on the ground. It's vibrating. So it's bare knuckle. And the fact that and it favors the courageous. So if somebody has decided now we have to go it that way, that's going to happen, really, honestly. So I know some people may have this or that, but those who may wait that they will be given down because they are loyal will remain like that. Eventually they join the other side because maybe they are trying to play it safe. We saw it when we were challenging the leadership of Uhuru Kenyatta in Central Kenya. There are people who sat on the fence and then they jumped the queue, and now they are the UDA Damu. But eventually some people have to start this whole conversation. They have to pay the price, and some of us paid very heavily, very, very heavily. But eventually it was done and we were vindicated. Now, coming to the issue of, and there's a new narrative. In fact, some of the people that are even clamoring for this change may not necessarily have been in ODM. Like my very good friend Billian Okoth Aujiwash. He did very well as a UDA candidate in Mathare. You know, he just lost by 5,000 votes against Anthony Oluoch. So let me say that the issue of promises, there is a narrative that the media has been trying to push, where the BAL, there are timelines that have been put in place under the plan, in the plan, and there are those that were put in place, in quotes, by the media. And they say within 100 days, these are the things that William Ruto has promised to do. And for sure, that's not the case. You go by the timelines, you get what the president has said. And of course, when you campaign in poetry. When you govern in prose. And when you are speaking on a podium, it is futuristic. It doesn't have to say that because you pronounce yourself today, it has to happen tomorrow. People are saying that they are comparing when Kibaki took over power 20 years ago and when Ruto has taken over power. When President Kibaki took over power, this country was for sure on a negative 2% growth, if I'm not wrong. That time, the economy was in recession. It was only about 250 billion worth. And by the time he left, you know, he had only given us debt worth 1.8 trillion, including all the roads that he had done, Thika Road, and any other thing that you can credit him for in terms of infrastructure. But when President Ruto is taking over power, he is inheriting a debt of over 11 trillion. We are almost insolvent because, for me, from a nominal GDP point of view, we've actually borrowed almost the whole of our economy, if not actually, because it keeps on changing maybe because of the dollar rate, but in actual sense, nominally it's about $100 billion. So you can see the challenge that we're having here. If we are collecting about 2.1 billion.
Did he spoke quick off the mark when he said now we won't really borrow?
No, that's futuristic.
Futuristic?
Yes, futuristic because...
What do you mean futuristic? And he said we've borrowed so much, so we won't really borrow anymore.
No. He wants to stem the tide. You know, we were at the edge. We actually are still at the edge of the economic precipice. And this is something we were able to predict way back in 2014. And it didn't matter who was to be president. It just happens that he is the one who became president. And he has actually, when he was in...
But I want you to speak on specifically on the rolling back of the subsidies.
Yeah,
I'll come to that. The fuel subsidies.
I mean, the president has said he's under no illusion that his journey to move us from poverty to prosperity, scarcity to abundance is going to be a walk in the park. He is very much aware of the task ahead of him. And so therefore, coming now to subsidies, how do you subsidize consumption? And you take 300 billion shillings off the budget, which is equivalent to a development expenditure, to just go and reduce the cost of the real cost of the market temporarily. If you look at the subsidies for maize, they were from July, I think 16, if I'm not wrong, to August 17th. So it was actually aimed at making people to vote in a certain way because it was not sustainable. How do you explain spending 16 billion on fuel subsidy every month? It's not sustainable, really. And now, if you look at the members of the Public Accounts Committee can tell us more, 4 billion cannot be accounted for. In fact, National Treasury was saying the other day, help us to get to know where this money went. Yet, I heard 2 days ago, Miller saying they have not been paid 2 billion. So who is fooling with who? In fact, there seems to be a lot of looting that was used. These subsidies were used as a scapegoat to actually siphon money out of the National Treasury. And it is not sustainable. And the direction is not to do away with subsidies per se, is to subsidize production. That is the change of tact. You subsidize production, not consumption, so that then you reduce the cost of products.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear from Otiende, this matter of subsidy, because I think it was a highly contentious issue that is going to subject Kenyans, to these shocks that now they are feeling. It seems maybe they've realized the subsidy was doing something, and that's why now they want to install it back. Was it a wrong move? They should have settled first to actually study the lay of the land?
Well, Isaac Maura says you campaign in poetry and govern in prose. That is just jargon for saying they made false promises. And that is a very serious admission. It's not just on the issue of subsidies. the Kenya Kwanza administration made so many promises, and they are going back on all of them. They promised education would be free. Now, not only do we have a situation where education is not free, it has become very expensive and very chaotic. We have ended up with a situation where you have a class 6 in secondary and a class 8 in primary. I mean, how do you even explain all this in logic? You know, the CBC situation is just total confusion. And so the education situation in this country is in peril. When it comes to fuel, they had promised that there would be nothing like subsidies, you know, even maize, and then they are going back on that. When they say that some people are holding maize in some of those places, those are the regions that gave them the most votes. So what are they telling the rest of us? They are telling us that their own people who belong to Kenya Kwanza are sabotaging the Kenya Kwanza government, or what? Because how else does it make sense? And they are the government. For all these things, whether it's the situation with GMO, which they have authorized without proper research, whether it's the situation of the security in the country, whether it's the increase in tribalism, it is total confusion. And it's summarized in one fact. Kenya Kwanza cannot come and tell us that they inherited a bad economy, that the previous administration was wrong. They were part of it. William Ruto was as much part of the administration as Gachagua is now. And you cannot have a situation where after 5 years or whatever number of years, Gachagua then comes and tells us that I was not part of that administration. If there are any ills that are historical, first, they should have said them. And secondly, they are responsible for it as anyone else that they can mention. And therefore, that cannot be what you tell us, because he was deputy president for 10 years. You and I were in no position to know or make any decision more than the deputy president. And as I used to say then, if there was something fundamentally bad, just like now we are saying of our colleagues, they should have said it, and they should have had the courage to walk away. That way, he would not take responsibility. You cannot be there up to the last minute, then you come and tell us things were really, really bad, and it's only now that we are getting to know. My last point before we continue to another subject is what Honorable David Ochieng spoke to. You know, Honorable David Ochieng, if you remember, even in the Supreme Court, we raised the issues around the numbers. And the way these elections were stolen, it was not just telling what has been cast. It was diminishing and making sure that in some areas certain votes were not cast. And one of the ways that was done in some of the regions that Azimio was strong in, and that is the truth. Let me give you an example. My own driver and my own bodyguard, who had changed their vote to my local primary school, and they had confirmed, on voting day, when they went, their name was nowhere. And that's just an example of two people close to me. So they could not vote. And when I moved around, I realized that one of the things that the IBC had done, it had cleverly made sure that some of the people who had changed their votes, either to now vote in those new areas, their name was not there. Yeah? And even some who had now moved, like in the urban and peri-urban areas, I would go to a center like, my small local town like Madiany, and I find there are 150 people who have not voted. And when we trace them, we find these are people who used to work there. They're not from the area, but they had moved elsewhere. For some reason, their names were still retained, even though they had changed. So obviously they would not vote where they went, and they can't vote here also because they are not working there, they are not coming back there. And those whose names should have been there, like my driver and bodyguard, their names are not there. So one of the ways of stealing this election was to diminish the numbers, having mapped certain regions. So it's not a good example to look at, for example, saying in Nyanza, so many people did not vote. It is one of the things we are trying to deal with right now, because you have as an IBC that has perfected the art, not just of stealing the votes that are cast, but even those that have not been cast, by managing it.
No debate. No. Because, you know...
We need to take a short break.
Yes, let's take a short break, but let's be clear. If we want to help each other in the future for elections, let's stop building conspiracy theories about elections. In the last election, we in Azimio had more power to know what was happening to the election process. We had NIS, we had everybody else. These things are coming because out of the fact because we thought we were sitting pretty.
Okay, allow me just to take a short break. Hold on to that. You'll tell us more on that. We'll take a short break. You're watching Siasa Fiesta. Also, when we come back, what about the CAS's positions as well?